Welcome into the ESPN FC studio. I'm Dan Thomas, joined by Stevie Nicol. We also welcome Gab Marcotti. There are still those, aren't there, that wish for a world without VAR. Like it or not, though, it is a constant pretty much across the board these days, of course, in the Premier League as well. But we wondered, Stevie, what would life be like without VAR? Well, this is how the table would look after 7 matches. Chelsea would remain atop. What's striking is the fact that it seems like Newcastle move up to 12 out of the relegation zone with 5 more points than they would have, of course, with VAR. Gab, what I thought was striking as well, looking at all of this and discussing the VAR effect, is the fact that there was so much hoo-ha. And I think that's a fair word to use from the UK and from people on Twitter saying, if VAR continues, I'm never going to watch football again. It has ruined it completely. But what I feel has happened, certainly this season, people have accepted it, the officials have got better at it, and everyone seems to be ready to move on.
I think to some degree it's true. I think people have become a little bit more sophisticated, especially because, look, I don't think the current crop of Premier League referees is particularly good. In fact, I think it's particularly bad. But I think people have come to distinguish between VAR and the referees. These are still human beings making decisions, and I think they've had enough big VAR cases where they make enormous blunders and VAR fixes them, that I think in general most people have come to accept it. I think a table like this, look, obviously it's early in the season, so these things will add up over time, but it can make a difference between relegation and staying in the Premier League, and that's worth a ton of money. It could make a difference in awarding the title. You think back to some of these decisions out there, and without VAR, it would be a different landscape. So think of Chelsea, when Liverpool played Chelsea, the reason Chelsea are ahead in this way is the Reece James handball on the line. That was VAR. So you put these decisions together, it does have a big impact.
But it's the impact, I imagine, as a manager, you can swallow a lot easier, Stevie, than without VAR, with those big referee decisions that went by without being checked in the past.
Yes, because the majority of VAR, we've got to a stage now, when VAR was introduced, there was I seem to remember, a lot of mistakes made.
Yes.
A lot of bad judgment calls. I think we've kind of got rid of that. I think there's only a couple now and then that we're going, oh, how can you possibly do that?
Yeah.
But, these things are so subjective. The Newcastle one's a great case in point, how you can look at VAR or stats or anything else and come up with something like that table.
Yeah.
Now, the fact is that Newcastle play a defensive game. And so there's probably not that much going on either in the opposition penalty box or Newcastle's own penalty box, because their whole setup is to make sure nobody gets anywhere near it. So then, if there's one decision that goes against them, then that changes the whole start. And it doesn't tell you how their season's going.
Yeah.
So I'm not a huge fan of it, as you can tell.
Sure.
But I think it's interesting that basically the top 4 or 5,
yes,
I'm going to assume, are probably going to be up there anyway, regardless with or without VAR.
And the Premier League seem to be continuing to learning as well, Gab. Obviously, they had that arrogance when it first started that they didn't need their referees to go over to the monitors, which has obviously changed this season.
Yeah, and I think people have grown accustomed to it. I think people have also, they saw VAR working very, very well in certain competitions. And they said, and I think this season it's been more about, well, how can we get the Premier League's VAR to work as well as it should be, as well as we've seen do elsewhere. So I think in some ways we've matured a little bit. The people who hate the VAR interruptions and looking at the screen and, the spontaneity, the celebration, that whole brigade, they're always going to be unhappy. But I think they'd be more unhappy if their team got relegated because of a really bad decision. The one other thing we should stress, though, is when we do this table, it's not like they just looked and took the incidents away. They went and they modeled what the outcome was going to be based on a whole bunch of other factors. So there is some modeling involved. So this is more of a projection of what it could like, of what it could look like rather, rather than simply going out and just like, all right, VAR got this, VAR fixed this, let's just take this goal away and that's that.
Yeah, Gab makes a good point. We've simplified really what has been a complicated process to come up with this table. Be sure to check out the article in some detail. But for now, that brings us to the end of this discussion with the boys. For more, of course, you can always check out ESPN FC over on our YouTube channel. Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week, subscribe to ESPN Plus.